It took 5 years from its announcement for Vanillaware's 13 Sentinels to see release, and after beating this 40-hour monster, I can see why. A 25-hour non-linear visual novel-style adventure game with 13 playable characters, combined with a 15-hour mech real-time strategy campaign. Did it work? Was it good? Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It was probably my favorite game of 2020. I can't really offer you a nice tidy logline to set up the game's story, since figuring out what the premise is and what is going on at all is the main challenge of this game's adventure segments. That isn't some wry criticism though. Piecing together this non-linear story that jumps through time and space and between multiple characters is legitimately a fun challenge. It invites you to explore a complex series of events that greatly benefits from being presented in an interactive format, where the player is encouraged to hop around from event to event, adding up clues in their own time, and analyzing and examining what they've discovered. The game's timeline menu helping pass it all out. There's some very light investigative gameplay to do sometimes when walking around the environments and talking to people, but the real challenge is absorbing all the different puzzle pieces and untangling the series of events transpiring. And it was really satisfying. Characters will say stuff that sounds like absolute nonsense and that doesn't seem to add up at all, and then you'll discover information later that has it make perfect sense. It all clicks into place so nicely, and I think the reason those clicks are so satisfying is because at the start you just get the sense that this is not going to make any sense at all. For a bit of very basic context, I'll say that throughout the adventure segments, you'll be spending a lot of time running around investigating conspiracies as teenagers in 1980s Japan. So yes, you do get a fair bit of anime-style high school drama and antics, especially near the beginning. Characters talking about mundane daily activities, blushing around their crushes, etc. Once you get through an initial barrage of that kind of thing though, and the science fiction kicks in properly, what you end up with is a very rewarding and compelling story with likable characters, all with their own mysteries and threads that intermingle with each other in fun ways. 13 Sentinels isn't here to indulge in the tropes of the Japanese high school setting, and it's not here to subvert those tropes either, both of which have been done to death already. It pays homage to the high school setting so often associated with Japanese sci-fi fantasy media, but that setting isn't the focus. That chunk of the overall setting becomes incidental to the wider story at play in 13 Sentinels, a dark sci-fi epic where nothing is as it seems and the stakes are sky high. The tone of the game is right up my alley, dark and harrowing but peppered with sparks of heart and humanity from the characters who have to endure this world. Overall, I really enjoyed the plot of this game. If you want to nitpick the story, there's an argument to be made that some of the more esoteric sci-fi tech introduced for certain plotlines can sometimes act in contrived or convenient ways when the plot needs it to. But that's kind of par for the course in this kind of complicated sci-fi. There's also, of course, the real-time strategy portion, which is selectable separately from the adventure segments, though these do have a tad bit of story as well. Now, I'll say up front that I'm not the best person to be judging this aspect of the title. I don't play many real-time strategy games. I have a suspicion, though, that this isn't the most complex or deep example of the genre, since me, a novice, managed to get to the credits without ever dying once on any mission. And this was on normal, not even easy. Calling it real-time strategy might even be a bit of a stretch, since the game pauses itself when you're selecting moves. There were a few close shaves though, and for what it's worth, I enjoyed the battle system. The various characters each have unique attributes and abilities that when combined on the field can create a nice varied pool of strategies. Shields, buffs, short-range attacks, long-range attacks, decoys, turrets, there's a lot to work with. The objectives though do seem to remain fairly similar. Usually the objective is always just to kill all the enemies and protect the central terminal. Thankfully, optional objectives do create restrictions that might force you to mix up your approach. For those looking for a challenge, there's a hard mode and post-game battles to take part in too, and even an easy mode if you're just here for the story. After the first few hours, you're allowed to either put your focus into battles or adventure content, getting a lot of freedom as to how much of each you do at one time. Occasionally, you'll be asked to have completed a certain amount of battles before being allowed into certain and story chapters, and vice versa, but it's infrequent enough as to allow you to focus on just one style of gameplay for at least a few hours at a time. Just keep in mind that to see the ending and the credits roll, you're gonna have to have done all of the adventure chapters and most of the battle missions. The title gives you a lot of freedom, but don't go into it thinking you can pick one style of gameplay and not the other and still beat the game. I think the degree of freedom given to the player when picking what to do is a perfect choice in terms of this game's design. The adventure segments and the battle segments are of course hugely different, but the whiplash that switching between the two could cause is mitigated by letting the player pace things out themselves. The player can, to a degree, decide on a pace that they're most comfortable with. Some may want to switch back and forth between the two styles frequently, but not forcing that approach on every player is for the best. The fact that the entire story is presented non-linearly works well with this approach. Since the story likes to jump around, when you do it too, it feels natural. It also goes without saying that the game looks amazing. The environments look incredible here, and the slick UI is a must, considering how often you'll be navigating menus. Perhaps the battle screen is a tad more abstract than it needed to be, but I sort of like the immediacy of it. To see your plans put into action, you don't have to wait for complex animations to play out or something like that. The soundtrack is also absolutely epic, with the best track saved for some of the most decisive battles of the title, and elsewhere the music helps maintain a solid atmosphere. Also, I did experience some slowdown and frame rate dips when stuff got really intense. That was back when I first played this game on a base PS4 though, so I should really give it a replay at some point on PS5 to see if things got smoothed out a bit. No matter what you play the game on though, it's not going to be a deal breaker. If you like dark science fiction and want to unravel compelling mysteries with some excellent payoff, then 13 Sentinels comes recommended. With my experience, I can't say for certain if it's for the strategy game veteran or anything, but I certainly had fun with that side of the game too. Amazing visuals, great soundtrack, satisfying battles, and a killer story with some absolutely legendary moments. What else can I do but give it a big thumbs up?